welcome into the Sunday morning live stream here at TimesU YouTube. We're back. It's week 14, first week of the fantasy playoffs for most people. And, I've got me right here and also as well Tones, as always. Tones, how are you feeling about this first week of the playoffs?
I'm hyped. I've made it in 5 out of 8 leagues, actually. So I'm, I'll have some cross-sharing to do as I have some guys rostered who I'll be playing this week as well. So now it's time to, put aside and figure out what money priority beats the rest of them. So I'm excited to help some people get some questions answered and help some people win some money.
That sounds good. I hope that I can win some money. I hope I can just break even in some leagues at this point, just getting into the playoffs.
How's your initials team looking? I mean, you couldn't have done too well if PJ Walker was perhaps your only quarterback start this year.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the consolation bracket in that public ESPN league, but I did finish 2-11, so I'm glad I won twice.
Yeah, that's an accomplishment, winning twice with PJ Walker being. I mean, hats off to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's mostly thanks to DK Metcalf and AJ Brown just having some crazy good weeks, but yeah, looks like we've already got some questions here to start off the show. First one coming in from Joseph Areola. Peterson or Barber? Coming in hot with questions. Yeah. Thanks for the early questions. Adrian Peterson or Peyton Barber? Peyton Barber, presumed to be the number one carry getter after Antonio Gibson went down last week and is not going to play this week. And Adrian Peterson looking like he's going to be the lead back with DeAndre Swift looking like he's not going to play again this week.
Actually, I think he might be playing now. It's saying that he is going to play today, it looks like.
Oh, it does look like you. Well, that kind of changed my answer entirely. I wasn't sure. As far as I had heard, it looked like DeAndre Swift wasn't going to play, but it looks like he will play now. And so that still puts me in kind of a dilemma because right now, Peyton Barber, he still doesn't seem very attractive for me to pick because J.D. McKissic, I feel, will be getting most of the snaps, but I don't feel like J.D. McKissic will be getting a lot of the carries. Obviously, he's more of a pass-catching back. So I think I still might lean Adrian Peterson in this one because I think with DeAndre Swift being back that they're still going to use Adrian Peterson quite a bit, and I think he'll get more yardage, but Peyton Barber, he could get like a 2-yard rushing touchdown.
Yeah, this one's tough because it's like even though DeAndre Swift is probably back, and he's still deemed questionable, obviously. His pride said it wasn't looking promising, but late last night it said he's expected to play after having an illness and concussion. He was a high draft pick for them, and it says he might not be the lead workhorse role coming back off of that, so that's interesting to hear. I mean, you never know if he's going to play in full or what the hell the idea is with DeAndre Swift. So we'll see what happens there. Peyton Barber is going to have a more prominent role without Antonio Gibson, obviously, but Washington is at San Fran. That's going to be a tough game. They might need to use J.D. McKissic more as a think and dunk guy. Out of the backfield, this is a tough one. I'd lean AP. I think AP is still going to get a good amount of touches this game, especially because he's been having good fantasy value the past few games. I think AP will for sure be at least their goal line back as, Swift is coming back with the concussion. If he does play indeed, they probably don't want to have him try and lower his head and get tough yards. AP's last 2 games combined, he has 31 carries for 115 yards and 4 touchdowns. So those 4 touchdowns are eye-opening. I think he's likely to get a 5th today against one of the worst running defenses in the NFL with the Packers.
Yeah, and the thing that worries me about Swift the thing that worries me about Barber is he's had 2 games this season where he's had over 12 carries. Just last week, week 14 against Pittsburgh, and then week 1 against Philadelphia, and he averaged about 1.68 yards per carry. That's not something that you like to see. I don't love it at all. And so I think just Adrian Peterson, he'll still get a bunch of carries, and he usually gets maybe around or maybe probably under 50 yards if he's in there. And, that goal line work, it might go to him with Swift dealing with the injury still. Joseph also asked Texans or 49ers D. I think.
Go ahead, Pride.
1 second. I believe the Texans today are playing the Chicago Bears. That is a very favorable matchup despite not being a very favorable defense. But I think in the end, I still have to go with the 49ers defense. I mean, going up against Washington without Antonio Gibson, they're going to be it's going to set Washington's team back a bit. And with the 49ers getting healthier each week, it seems, I think that'll be a lot better, especially because we've seen, at least when it comes to the Texans defense, they're one of the worst in the league when it comes to rushing defense. And when David Montgomery goes up against a bad rushing defense like Detroit, then he has pretty good games. And, they don't have to rely on Mitchell Trubisky if David Montgomery's getting a bunch of yards on the ground.
Yeah, it's tough because I want to say 49ers defense, but I'm going to go ahead and say I'd rather play the Texans defense here. I just lick my chops anytime that a defense could play against Mitchell Trubisky, a guy who gets sacked all the time. I mean, Mitch Trubisky literally runs himself into sacks. This is a guy who looks lost oftentimes in the pocket, and I think he's going to continue to perhaps look lost this week. I don't think he's going to do anything at all. I think the Texans are going to stifle the Bears, although their pass D is atrocious. I think the Bears have packed it up for the year. I think the Texans are going to have a bloodbath of a day. I'd go with Texans over 49ers because Washington's competing in the playoffs or in the thick of things. Ron Rivera is going to come out with perhaps a smart game plan, turnover-free football. They're without their best offensive playmaker. Maybe, they don't try and do a lot of things to cause a lot of mishap. I'm going with the Texans defense.
Yeah, man. I really want Washington and the Giants to lose today just because I want whoever wins that division to have 10 losses. Can I have that?
That would be fun.
Next question coming in from Myron. Start 2, sit 2, Brandon Ayuk, Robbie Anderson, Deebo Samuel, and Chase Claypool. Okay, out of these guys, I think I'd be wanting to start Brandon Ayuk as well as I think I want to go with Chase Claypool. I know he's got kind of a tough matchup against the Buffalo Bills, but I kind of want to go with Chase Claypool because, one, I don't really like playing wide receivers who are on the same team in my 2 wide receiver spots. And I like Brandon Ayuk better than I like Deebo Samuel. He did more last week when both of them were playing, and he's just been playing more recently, obviously, because of Deebo's injury. And so I just like Ayuk more there. And Robbie Anderson, he's really just come off slow here near the end of the season. He hasn't been used as much in that Panthers offense. The Panthers offense as a whole has not looked as explosive as they did early on in the season. So I'm just going with Chase Claypool for that big upside.
Yeah, I think it's his time to return to the end zone now, as he hasn't been there in 2 weeks, and he has 10 touchdowns this year. So you could surely be sure that Chase Claypool is probably on the odds of probability here, statistically, will find his way into the end zone this week. So I'd lean with Chase Claypool. And then, as you said, it's hard to choose between teammates, especially teammates that are going up against the top 2 pass defense in all of football right now with the Washington football team. So when it's studs, I don't let that blind me. But with guys like Ayuk and Samuel, I don't think their difference make it enough. But then again, Robbie Anderson's going up against a tough Broncos pass D as well. At the end of the day, I think it comes down to Robbie Anderson, or I'm going with Deebo Samuel or Robbie Anderson, and I'm going to go with Robbie Anderson. I like his matchup a little more. I think Ayuk and Samuel split time a little bit. I agree with Chase Claypool, but I'm going to go Robbie Anderson. Although he's been boomer bust, I like him today to be paired with Chase Claypool. The other 2 guys are good wide receivers, but when they're both on the same team, it's hard.
Yeah, it's really hard when you're signing because it's just, yeah. Next question coming in from Alma Garcia. They ask, Rodgers or Mahomes for my QB? Thanks, guys. Man, this is This is tough. I mean, they're both kind of playing very well right now, but honestly, I think I'm going to have to go with Aaron Rodgers right now. I know Patrick Mahomes has kind of been more consistent throughout the season, but I'm worried today. Going up against the Miami Dolphins defense, they've been one of the best defenses on the season so far. I feel like if there's any defense that's going to make Patrick Mahomes make mistakes, it's going to be this Miami team. Brian Flores has been doing a great job, whereas Aaron Rodgers, he gets to go up against the Detroit Lions. I think it's as simple as that.
Yeah, that's pretty simple of an equation there. It's tough anytime you have Mahomes and Rodgers to make that type of call. I think I prefer Rodgers here too. You never know if Detroit does try and play a tough divisional game, but Rodgers at Detroit just is a dream matchup. Detroit's really been poor on defense this year. As Pride said, Chiefs have to go to Miami. I think it's maybe a different story if Chiefs are home and Miami has to go to them. But since it's the other way around, I'm going to lean with Aaron Rodgers, as both don't really turn the ball over much either. So that's not really too much of a factor there. And we have a question coming in from Pops on Twitter now. It's a PPR league. Parker or Lockett at wide receiver. He wants to know if he should play Tyler Lockett or Devontae Parker. We're going to start with you on this one, Pride PPR.
That's tough because I like both the matchups. Devontae Parker going up against the Chiefs secondary, and then Tyler Lockett going up against the Jets secondary. Both I feel weak in my opinion, but I think I'm going to lean Tyler Lockett. I know he's been very inconsistent to say the least so far this season, but I feel like against the Jets, this is the game that him and Metcalf are going to be able to come together and both have good fantasy weeks, whereas it was usually one or the other, mainly Metcalf, but usually one or the other. But I think against the Jets, it's just more of a clear-cut kind of thing, whereas the Dolphins, even though I like the matchup against secondary, I'm still just a little more hesitant about Tua Tagovailoa's ability to throw it to him. I'm not sure if he will focus on him the most, even though he is the best wide receiver and really the best pass catcher out there, or if he'll favor dumping it down to Mike Gesicki more. I guess I'm more confident in the Seahawks deep ball ability.
Yeah, and everybody's seen that last play of the game last week the Raiders had against the Jets, that Hail Mary that got a lot of fantasy points for the Raiders, quarterback wide receiver tandem. You could expect that, but multiple times today, Seattle at home coming off a tough loss against the Giants. You know, they're going to be fired up, ready to go. I think it's going to get ugly for the Jets. I think that Tyler Lockett's going to have a big game. He hasn't scored in a couple weeks now either. Devontae Parker's tricky, as Pride said. A couple weeks ago he had over 100 yards, and last week 4 grabs for 35 yards against a piddly Bengals D. I'm going with Lockett. I think Lockett's ceiling is a lot higher, while his floor is higher as well.
Yeah. Next question coming in from Alma Garcia again. You think David Montgomery has another breakout game this week? I do. Going up against the Texans defense. The Texans right now have given up the second most rushing yards on the season they've just given up the second most rushing yards on the season. The only real competition that they've had is the Dallas Cowboys. Obviously, we saw David Montgomery had a great game when they played against Detroit. Detroit has given up the most rushing touchdowns so far on the season. And so I just think it's going to be a good time. The Chicago Bears offensive line really just needs to focus in on J.J. Watt and just make holes on the other side of the line for him. And he's shown that he has the ability to find those holes and squeeze right through. He's kind of a littler kind of guy. And so I think that we can expect to see a game just kind of like their game against Detroit.
Yeah, I think Montgomery has another breakout game in store as well. I mean, I think the Bears at this point pretty much realize, too, that they're obviously not going to win throwing the football. Why not try running the football? And what a better recipe for success than David Montgomery back there, a guy who had a lot of high hopes being a rookie last season. I think he's going to get a lot of touches today and give him the potential to have the breakout game today. It's really up to this Bears offensive line to fortify his breakout game today that some people do expect. So yeah, I'm going with he will have another breakout game, or at least a touchdown and 80 yards or so, if you want to refer that as a breakout game. But I think he'll have a successful game for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, he's been pretty hot recently. I mean, last week against Detroit, he had 2 touchdowns for 72 yards. The week before that against Green Bay, he had over 100 yards rushing. So he's been kind of on a hot streak, and I really expect that to continue, especially he's played some pretty bad rushing defenses in Green Bay and Detroit. Now he gets another one this week.
Yeah, you gotta love the matchup as a fantasy owner, especially it's a good time matchup for Mont.
Yeah. Next question from Olivia Scordato. Corey Davis or Jarvis Landry?
Laundry.
Landry, the laundry man. Let's see. Cleveland Browns going up against the Baltimore Ravens this week, and the Tennessee Titans going up against, who was it? The Jaguars this week. The Jaguars, I think just because of the matchups, I might have to go with Corey Davis. I'm pretty sure on the podcast this week, I kind of said how I think that this will be the week that Baker Mayfield kind of comes down from this hot stretch that he's been on recently, and Jarvis Landry is going to really pay for that. Whereas Corey Davis, he's been doing pretty well this season. He's kind of gone under the radar just because a lot of people have been expecting more from A.J. Brown, but since they're expecting more, that production's got to be going somewhere, and it's been going to Corey Davis as of recently. I mean, last game against Cleveland, 182 yards receiving for a touchdown. The week before that, he had 70 yards receiving on 3 receptions. Week before that, another 100-plus yard receiving game. He's had 400-plus yard receiving games so far this season. And going up against the Jacksonville Jaguars, that's not a team that you're going to be really scared to play. The only real concern I would have with that is just the Titans get off to such a big lead and they just give the ball to Derrick Henry all of the second half. So I think that's a little bit of worry, but also think if that happens, that will just be because Corey Davis had some big time receptions and at least one touchdown.
And this question is really tough as well because Jarvis Landry's last 2 games have actually been really good too. His last 2 games combined, he's had 16 receptions for 205 yards and 2 touchdowns, and his value seems to perhaps be on the rise a little bit, but being against Baltimore, being a division game that they must win, they're going to do what they need to do best to me, and that's run the football, whereas I think Pride said it best. Tennessee's going to have an opportunity to get up early on Jacksonville. But here's what I like too in the playoffs, especially. I like having that Monday night security blanket a little bit. So here's my take on it. If you have no one else in tomorrow's Monday night game, I lean Jarvis Landry. But if you already have your security Monday night football blanket, I'm going Corey Davis.
Yeah, that kind of makes sense. And kind of thinking about it, I feel like Jarvis Landry is still going to have a decent game. I feel like he's going to be kind of like the safer play, but I feel like Corey Davis is kind of that boom play if you really need it to win.
I agree with that too. And Corey Davis has had a lot of, doubters proved wrong this year. A lot of people were down on Corey Davis coming into this season. He had an off-field tragedy where he lost a loved one, and he's been playing some really good football this year. So we'll see. Today is a good opportunity to keep that up against Jacksonville, but at the same time, Landry's right in the hot hand too. Those are 2 guys. Can't go wrong either way. I just give the slight edge to Landry if you need that security blanket.
Yeah. I know I was one of the Corey Davis doubters going into the season, but who knew? Fourth year is the year for a breakout. Next question coming in from Trey S. Morning, fellas. Full PPR. Choose 2: Marvin Jones, Melvin Gordon, Josh Jacobs, or DeAndre Swift. I think I'll choose kind of the easy 2 for me. I'm going with Marvin Jones. He's been really hot as of recently, especially last week. First week without Matt Patricia as their head coach. Had a great game there. I'll just take a second to look it up. Yeah, his first 100-yard receiving game and also had a touchdown. He's also had at least 10 targets in 3 of the past 4 weeks. So he's been getting the looks. He's been getting the work. He's really their only reliable wide receiver. I know TJ Hawkins also a reliable target, but he's their most reliable wide receiver. And as long as Kenny Galladay is going to be out, I think that you can keep playing him. And for my other one, I think I'm going to choose Josh Jacobs. It looks like he's going to come back. Looks like he's going to be able to play today. And the Raiders going up against the Indianapolis Colts, it's going to be a tough day just for that offense in general. I think it's going to be a tough day running the ball and tough day passing. But when it's a tough day passing, you might as well just run the ball because I'm not sure how open the Raiders wide receivers will be able to get. And so I think they will have to rely heavily on Josh Jacobs. And, he'll probably also get some passes out of the backfield.
Yeah, after a couple huge yards per carry average games early on this year for Devontae Booker for the Raiders, their backup running back, he's cooled off immensely the past 3 weeks, raising Jacobs' value even more perhaps. They need him, and the Colts defense is very good, so they're going to have to run the ball. That's what they do the best. I'd go Josh Jacobs as he's clearly the best player when healthy out of any of these guys. And then I'd go Marvin Jones as well. As in the past 6 weeks, he does have 5 touchdowns, and Galladay is out again, I believe. So look for Marvin Jones to continue his success without both Galladay and Matt Patricia being in the equation.
I hope it's a good day. I hope it's a good day for Marvin Jones, just for personal reasons too. He's really helped out one of my teams. Next up, Joseph Ariola with another question. He asks, Gio Bernard or Duke Johnson? No PPR. This is a really tough question.
I feel like this question's came up a couple times over the course of the season, when these guys are both asked to play.
I think I'm going to lean Gio Bernard still. I think I've mostly been going with Gio Bernard, and I'm going to go with Giovanni. Once again this week, the Texans going up against the Bears, they've got a pretty good front seven there. Can really stop the run, and Duke Johnson has shown he's not really good at running the ball. He's not really good at running the ball. He's definitely more of a pass catching back than he is running back. But I feel like Deshaun Watson's still more eager to throw it downfield than he is to dump it off to Johnson. And Giovanni Bernard, obviously they've still got Brandon Allen as their quarterback. And so the passing game is kind of iffy for the Bengals, but that's fine since they're going up against the Cowboys. I kind of mentioned earlier, the Texans have given up the second most rushing yards this season, but the Cowboys have given up the most. They've given up over 2,000 rushing yards so far this year. And Giovanni Bernard, it looks like it's going to be kind of a run-first game plan for the Bengals. And running seems to very much work against the Cowboys defense.
Yeah, one thing here too, though, is with Brandon Cooks and David Johnson being out, that seems to likely increase the chances maybe of Duke Johnson targets, but at the same time, Duke Johnson is really touchdown dependent, as is, it seems, Gio Bernard, but against that Cowboys defense that gets gashed so much, I like Gio Bernard a little more here. I think he's going to get more action. I think he's going to get more touches. Duke Johnson could be targeted a little more with Cooks being out, but I think Giovanni Bernard is ultimately the safer play, perhaps, although they have showed the Bengals a little bit do use Samjay Pirine when Mixon can't play, so hopefully he's not a touchdown vulture. But at the end of the day, I think Giovanni Bernard is a safer pick here than Duke Johnson.
Yeah, especially in a no PPR league.
Yeah, no PPR, that's a kicker.
So if he is just dumping the ball off to Duke Johnson, he's not going on wheel routes like he did in Thanksgiving, then if he's just getting a couple yards per play, then it's basically as good as running the ball up the middle.
Right, especially exactly right. In a non-PPR, that's a huge difference because he had 6 receptions for only 24 yards last week. So if that's a PPR league, your eyes probably light up a little bit. Oh, 6 grab potential. But then in an OPPR, you look and, 24 yards. Nah, we cool on that. We good on that.
Yeah, I mean, like in the PPR league, that's almost 8.5 points. In a no PPR league, then it's just 2.5 points, basically.
Yeah, that thing that gets changed drastically. And we have another question here from Pops coming in. No PPR, Le'Veon Bell, Frank Gore, or Mike Davis. And this one's easy to me. Mike Davis, obviously, he's starting for the Panthers. I don't think Frank Gore is questionable. He might not play, obviously. And Le'Veon Bell, his potential just hasn't been there this year. So I'm going with Mike Davis. Especially without McCaffrey, Mike Davis has big game potential. To me, you have to play Mike Davis today. He's projected 12 points in a non-PPR, whereas the other guys aren't even close to that. So Mike Davis, to me, is a safe play out of Bell, Davis, and Gore.
Yeah, I'd have to agree there. Mike Davis is a safe play. He hasn't been as explosive as he was early on in the season when he took over for Christian McCaffrey, but yeah, I think he can still be a very nice borderline. And I mean, like you said, Le'Veon Bell, we don't even know how many carries he's going to get. Clyde Edwards-Helaire looks like he's going to be back and healthy, and so that's probably is going to be lucky if Bell gets 5 carries this game. And Frank Gore, I mean, Q could probably tell you how much he disliked Frank Gore's week last week after getting injured. And if he stays healthy, he could probably be on par with Mike Davis, I believe. But Mike Davis, I'm just more comfortable with that.
Yeah, it's hard not to. I mean, the other guys aren't even guaranteed touches weekly. At least Mike Davis, when he's starting, is guaranteed starting running back touches pretty much. So, yeah, you got to go Mike Davis here, especially without McCaffrey. It'd be different if perhaps McCaffrey was in, but since he's out, this is a no-brainer.
Yeah. And now I think it's time while we're waiting for questions to come in, I think it's time we talk a little bit about kind of injuries that have popped up recently. One of them we kind of already brought up, and some disappointing news that I woke up to this morning. Brandon Cooks is not looking to be able to play this against the Bears today. It was per sources, he's not expected to play, barring any significant late improvements. So, yeah, he's not going to play. It doesn't look like that's going to happen today, which is very unfortunate for me. I've already had to change who I was going to play in my flex spot multiple times so far this week. And so I had to make a quick move this morning and play someone else. But that kind of leads me into one guy that I did pick up to play in place of Brandon Cooks was Breshad Perriman, who's looking like he could have a very good week this week as we look at some of the Jets' inactives today. Denzel Mims, obviously, is suspended. He won't be playing, as well as Jamison Crowder. He's questionable. Right now, it looks like he will play, but he is questionable right now with a calf injury. Calf injuries are not very good for wide receivers, because as we saw last season with Adam Thielen's calf injury, he would be good to go play, and then about after 2 or 3 routes, he'd be like, nah, I can't run on this. And so Breshad Perriman, if you have him, I think you might really take a hard look and think about flexing him today. He's going up against the Seattle Seahawks defense. They're one of, if not the worst defense so far. I think they are the worst defense when it comes to PPR leagues, when it comes to giving up points to the wide receiver. And so Breshad Perriman, someone that you might be able to find on your waiver wires who could be very well worth a start today. Some other notes from the Arizona Cardinals: Kenyon Drake and DeAndre Hopkins both dealing with their own injuries, but they are both expected to play against the New York Giants today. And so that's good to hear. I'm sure a lot of Kenyon Drake owners were worried this week when that was coming up, but it does look like he will be able to play today. So hopefully he can get you a touchdown.
Yeah, and also we have a little news here to confirm our previous thoughts. Adam Schefter officially confirms Brandon Cooks is inactive today. It's the Texans' choice to not play him. They're playing it safe. It says Texans opted not to play Brandon Cooks today, and he is officially inactive. Kiki Kute is officially active, so sneak him in your lineup. He has potential, especially with how thin they are, and Buccaneers week 14 inactives, and inactives pouring in around the NFL are coming out as well. One guy thought to maybe be inactive would have been Cameron Brate, but a little bit surprised inactive here today. Leonard Fournette is announced inactive for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So if you have Leonard Fournette in your starting lineups, make sure that Leonard Fournette is out of those lineups. Is Ryan Griffin, Leonard Fournette, Jamel Dean, Tanner Hudson, Khalil Davis, and Jeremiah Ledbetter round up the Bucs inactives. So it'll be interesting to see the exact reasoning on why Leonard Fournette is inactive for this game, but Keyshawn Vaughn is active as Leonard Fournette's announced a healthy scratch. So Pride, a lot of Bucs fans this week have been saying Leonard Fournette needs to do more. Now he doesn't get his chance to do more. What are your thoughts on Leonard Fournette? I mean, this is obviously not good for his career. And some more running back news. Lions got a scare this morning. DeAndre Swift's test came back as invalid per league sources, whatever the hell that means. So now we're getting invalid COVID test in Pride. DeAndre Swift's COVID test was invalid. They had to rerun it. Once they did, it came back clean, and Swift is now cleared to play today versus the Packers. So a little bit of a crazy few minutes here with running backs. Leonard Fournette is a healthy scratch. Meanwhile, DeAndre Swift is playing today, perhaps with inactive COVID case. I'm not sure how to take that. What are your thoughts on those two running back news?
Well, I'm sure Leonard Fournette, I definitely haven't been looking to play him for the past couple of weeks. I mean, he just hasn't gotten too many carries. Ronald Jones has really become that lead back that we've kind of expected him to become. And so although I don't really understand the healthy scratch, because I do think that Leonard Fournette's still a better running back than Keyshawn Vaughn, it won't really change my outlook to the week this week. But as for DeAndre Swift, I mean, I guess he just didn't shake the cup enough to get his spit mixed in. I don't know if they take spit tests or if they take the nose test. I've only taken spit tests to test for COVID, but yeah, I don't know how that became invalid. But I mean, if it did come back positive the second time around, then I guess that's really good. I still do not believe that he will be taking the brunt of the work. I think that Adrian Peterson, referring to our question from earlier, I still think Adrian Peterson will be a better play than Peyton Barber, because I still think that he will get the work going forward. And it seems like we have another question. Lucius Vorenis 44 asked, half PPR, Kamara or Taylor? Thanks in advance. This is very challenging for me. I mean, I've not been on the Jonathan Taylor hype train since really the season started. I mean, before I was thinking that Jonathan Taylor was going to be a good running back, but really after week one, after Naheem Hines' game, I was like, oh, maybe they're not going to use him to the fullest. But over the past 2 weeks, Taylor has had back-to-back 90-yard rushing games. He has been getting a lot more work than he has. Well, he's still been getting a lot of work like he has throughout most of the season, but now he's been able to make the most of it. But really on the other side, also you have Alvin Kamara, who it seemed like he was having a better time last week. Really his first really good game with Taysom Hill as the quarterback. I really want to believe that Alvin Kamara is going to continue on, and maybe since his rushing work came back the last week, his receiving work will come back this week along with that rushing work. I really want to believe that, and I really think I will believe that. I'll believe in that more than Jonathan Taylor. New Orleans going up against the Philadelphia Eagles, taking that into consideration, I do like that matchup more than I like the Colts going up against the Las Vegas Raiders. The Raiders, I feel like, have a pretty attackable secondary, but I feel like their front seven is better than their secondary, and so the Colts might look to aim for the passing game more than the rushing game. Whereas against the Eagles, I think it's all just fair game.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Jonathan Taylor's backfield is you never know. Nyheim Hines pops off here and there too. He's had a couple of the big fantasy games out of the Colts backfield this year, and then you look at Wilkins. He had one of the featured back games, so it's really you're never sure who's going to have that big Colts game. It really just depends if they have to pass the ball more or run the ball more. It seems as if they pass more, it has a bigger opportunity to be Nyheim Hines, and if they run more, it has a bigger opportunity to be Jonathan Taylor. But with that being said, we've seen Wilkins and Hines have good running games too this year. Meanwhile, Kamara has been a touchdown machine lately as he's racked up 5 touchdowns over his previous 3 or 4 weeks. So I think you're really going to have to lean with your big guns here. You could feel safe. Here's how I look at it. If I'm a fantasy playoff manager, and if I bench Kamara and he has a big game, do I feel worse about that than I do benching Taylor if he has a big game? And that's absolutely, you drafted Kamara high for a reason. There's no way you did not draft Kamara in the first round. You got to go Kamara. It's fantasy time. It's playoff time. There's a reason why you drafted first round picks. It's for times like this, for weeks like this. I'm not huge on Alvin Kamara, but I do think today he pays dividends over Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah, man. I really hope for your sake that you can make it to your championship game, because I think in the championship game, Alvin Kamara will absolutely eat. Right now, Drew Brees does not. Reports came in that it does not look likely that he will make it back. Well, obviously he's not going to play this week, but also doesn't look likely that he will be able to play next week as well. So I'm hoping week 16 he'll come back in full force, which means Alvin Kamara will also be back in full force. Next question coming in from Austin Suachank. Start to Corey Davis, Robbie Anderson, or Kiki QT. I think I'm going to stick with one of my answers from earlier. I'm going to go with Corey Davis as one of them. And I'm still not really feeling Robbie Anderson, so I think I'm going to go Kiki QT. Kiki now kind of has full, what is it? I guess you could say full command over the Texans passing game. I mean, their number 2 wide receiver right now is, what was his name? Chad Hansen.
Yeah.
Chad Hansen. That sounds more like a magazine model's name than a football player's name. And I think behind him is Isaiah Coulter, who's still just no one you've never heard of. So Kiki QT is the number 1 wide receiver for the Texans. Deshaun Watson probably going to still, even without his top 4 wide receivers from the start of the season, his top 4 wide receivers are Brandon Cooks is out, Kenny Stills was released, Will Fuller suspended, and Randall Cobb's on IR. So now he's on to his 5th wide receiver from the start of the season. But Kiki QT, we saw last week he had a good game, and now that he's kind of the number 1 on that team, I expect even more.
Yeah, Kiki Kuti is obviously number 1 this week in a offense that's been airing it out lately with Deshaun Watson too, may we add, no matter who their weapons are. So I obviously like Kiki Kuti. He's had big games in his career time to time when he was a rookie. They kind of inactivated him when they kept adding weapons under B.O.B., Big Bill O'Brien, but he's back on the rise with all these injuries again. I like him today, and I also like Corey Davis over Robbie Anderson today. I'd go Corey Davis and Kiki Kuti with this one. I think that both of these guys, I mean, anyone against Jacksonville is big game potential alone. And so that's why I like Corey Davis right there. And Kiki Kuti, a number 1 wide receiver on any team, is often worthy of a start in fantasy, especially one with Deshaun Watson at quarterback for a team that's been airing it out. So I'd roll with Kuti and CD and Corey Davis.
Next question coming in from Matthew A. Matthew asks, what's good, guys? I got a question. Pick 2, Mike Davis, DeAndre Swift, or Wayne Gallman. Ooh. This is kind of tough. I think my number 1 out of those guys will be Wayne Gallman. He's been really the focal point of the Giants offense so far. And going to look up. I remember hearing some things about Daniel Jones possibly being able to start, and
He's
it looks like
active.
he will
It's
start.
officially announced. It was just announced a minute ago on Fantasy that he is active.
Yeah, and so it looks like Daniel Jones will be the starter. I guess that does take me off of Gallman a little bit, but in the end, I think he's still going to be the best running back out of those guys. Other than that, I think I will stick with Mike Davis over DeAndre Swift. I'm still worried about Adrian Peterson looking kind of good the past couple of weeks. I'm afraid that they still might use Adrian Peterson a lot, that Swift just won't be as valuable as Davis and Gallman this week.
Yeah, I think so too. Mike Davis, anytime that McCaffrey's out, is obviously a start. As you said, sure, production may be on and off, up and down, but I'm going with Davis over Swift for sure, and Gallman over Swift as well. I think Gallman's touchdown production, he's a must start at this point on a Giants team that has difficulty throwing perhaps time to time, especially near the goal line where they like to keep it on the ground. And then in terms of the other guys, I think I just like Mike Davis's opportunities more this week than Swift's. It's a good situation to have for yourself, but I'm going with Davis and Gallman.
Yeah, especially with the Lions going up against the Packers, you would assume that the Lions would have to air the ball out more if they want to keep pace.
Yeah.
Next question coming in from Jin. He asks, full PPR, should I start Claypool, Mike Davis, or Curtis Samuel at flex? Curtis Samuel, I still don't really trust. It seems like he seemed to get a lot of usage out of the Panthers. Have seem like they've been trying to use him a lot in different situations, but it doesn't always seem to come to fruition in fantasy terms. I think this will kind of depend on who else you have. I think I would personally lean towards Chase Claypool just because I believe that he has the possibility of scoring the most points out of these guys by at least 5 points. I really think that he can have a boom game this week against who are the Steelers playing again?
Buffalo
against the Bills. Yeah, I think he could have a really boom game since I feel like the Bills will probably be able to keep the Steelers on their heels and they'll either keep matching the Steelers or the Steelers will have to keep matching them. And so I think Chase Claypool has a high touchdown probability and high yardage possibility as these guys. Whereas Mike Davis, I think he's more of a safer pick, but I think I would lean more towards Claypool at flex.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Mike Davis here. I've been a big advocate on all these shows kind of is that I like starting running backs. And although I do like Chase Claypool's touchdown potential, there's just so many options and targets on that Steelers team to catch balls. And I know they've been like an Ebron a lot lately. Deontay Johnson's there as well. And they obviously have Juju Smith-Schuster. So it's kind of crowded along with James Washington. I like Mike Davis today. I think he's going to be a good start. I'd roll with him.
Okay. Next question, another one from Lucius. He says, thank you so much. Excellent explanation. To his previous question about the hard decision, embarrassing to ask. Listen, you're asking about a kicker. Don't be embarrassed. I love me some kickers.
Kickers matter.
Okay, let me tell you about this. I love me some kickers. I know Younghoe Koo, he's been one of the best so far this season, but don't worry, there's still some guys that you can pick up who are probably going to have a good week. I'm just looking at kind of ESPN's start percentage, or actually, I'll just look at the roster percentage, see how many you can possibly find on waiver wires today. Okay, so I think maybe one of the guys that I'm looking to play the most, Joey Sly, he's been really great this season for Carolina. Going up against Denver, I think Denver's defense is going to be very bend, don't break against the Panthers today. Joey Sly might be one guy that you look for, as well as possibly Graham Gano for the New York Giants. He just got healthy last week, or I think maybe it was the week before. Graham Gano, he was on the COVID-19 list, but now that he's back, he's got a very powerful leg. And the Giants, I don't really like the Giants' offensive scoring potential, and so I think they can get down the field in this game against the Cardinals. I think their defense has kind of bend don't break, whereas the Giants are move don't score kind of, and so I think Graham Gano and Joey Sly will both get plenty of attempts in their games against the Cardinals and Broncos, and they're reasonably rostered, and so I'm sure you can find at least one of those guys on your waivers.
Yeah, two guys that I look at to maybe pick up this week outside of those guys who are two top 6 ranked kickers and who are both less than 45% owned. I look at Tyler Bass, rookie kicker for Buffalo. He's been incredible this season. He's had a 6 field goal game this season with 8 attempts that game. And then his past 3 weeks, he's been automatic. He was 3 for 3 in week 10 and 2 for 2 the past couple of weeks. So he's been really good. The Bills keep scoring points too, so his potential's up there. And then I like Ryan Suckup today. I think the Bucs offense has a bounce back day today. He's owned in less than 31% of leagues right now. I think he's a good option at home. I think he could have double-digit potential today. So look for guys like Suckup and look for guys like Tyler Bass to perhaps, along with Gano and along with I forget the other, Joey Sly, but those 4 right there are pretty legit options who you could look at perhaps outside of Young Hui Koo. And we have another question from Pops on Twitter pouring in. He says, my top question of the day, 3 out of 5 PPR league. You got to start 3, Pride. Get your memory cap on because this one's a tough one. Raheem Mostert, J.D. McKissick, Ronald Jones, David Montgomery, Wayne Gallman. 3 out of 5 in a PPR league. Who would you tell Pops to start out of those guys? We'll start with you.
Okay, I need the last 2 again.
Montgomery and Gallman. So it went Mostert, McKissick, Ronald Jones, Montgomery, and Gallman.
Okay. Pick 3 of those. I think I'll have to lean. I think out of those guys, I would lean David Montgomery. We've already talked about he's going up against a favorable matchup against the Houston Texans, a favorable rushing defense there. Ronald Jones, he's been very hot so far this season. Going up against the Minnesota Vikings, they've got a better run defense than they do a pass defense, but I still believe that he will be able to have a really good game on the ground, especially with the news that Leonard Fournette is a healthy and active. I think that'll just give more carries to Ronald Jones, beck and call. And then out of the last 3, I think I would lean Wayne Gallman still. Wayne Gallman, he's been, like I said before, Wayne Gallman, he's kind of been the focal point of the Giants offense. He's gotten over 10 carries ever since Saquon Barkley was ruled out for the season, and he's coming off of his first 100+ yard game, going up against the Arizona Cardinals, another defense that he can probably break a couple big runs off of. So yeah, I'm going with Rojo, Montgomery, and Gallman.
Yeah, I'm going with Rojo, Monty, and Gallman as well. I like Ronald Jones a lot today. Even against Kansas City, they only gave the guy a couple touches out of the backfield, and he did really good. He had 9 carries for 66 yards. If the Bucs would have gotten more involved against Kansas City, their opportunity might have been there for the taking against those guys. I like Ronald Jones out of the bye week, especially with Leonard Fournette being a healthy scratch. I think that they really game planned around Ronald Jones a second today. Then I really think they had something up their sleeve because Keyshawn Vaughn, I'm sorry, I thought of Keyshawn Johnson a minute. Keyshawn Vaughn, a rookie running back who hasn't played too much this year, so he's not going to take away too many touches. LaShawn McCoy is not going to take away too many touches. Kenjon Barner is not going to take away too many touches. So Ronald Jones is back there as a lead prime role, and as Pride said, he's been really productive, a top 5 rusher pretty much most of the NFL season. Then we've talked up Montgomery's game today. I think Montgomery is another big game today. He's been playing really good for the Bears. And then Wayne Gallman as well. Touchdown potential is there, and the Giants offense looks really good when it's centered around Wayne Gallman, actually. So Wayne Gallman, perhaps RB1 of the future. No, I'm kidding. But Wayne Gallman is playing really good football. I don't think you could trust McKissick over Peyton Barber. It depends what type of game plan Washington football team comes out with. If it's more of a running plan, probably Barber. More of a passing plan, McKissick. And then it seems like 49ers like Jeff Wilson out of their backfield just as much as they like Mostert lately. So I'm going with Jones, Montgomery, and Gallman out of that pretty good cluster of 5 running backs.
Yeah. Next question coming in from C. Chav. Rank these running backs for today. PPR, Duke Johnson, Raheem Mostert, Giovanni Bernard, Peyton Barber. There are 2 ways I can take this next one. Josh Johnson. I'm pretty sure you're not talking about the XFL quarterback. I'm pretty sure you either mean Josh Jacobs or Kerryon Johnson. I'll get back to you on that. And then Chris Carson.
Yeah, we'll just assume Josh Jacobs he meant. We'll go with that.
Okay.
If we assume Josh Jacobs, I'm going Chris Carson, number 1. He's had some very good games out of the backfield for Seattle this year. He's been pretty good. So I'd go with him, number 1 for sure. I'd go with Josh Jacobs, number 2, just for his stature there. I'd go with Duke Johnson, number 3, Gio Bernard, number 3, followed by perhaps Duke Johnson, then Mostert, then Peyton Barber. That's just my ranking. If I had to rank, I kind of did it how I see touches playing out as well. I just don't trust Mostert anymore. I like Carson the most out of that group for sure, though.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to agree with you full-heartedly there. I do like Chris Carson the most going up against the New York Jets. I would hope that the Seahawks will win this easily and that the Jets will just be down passing the ball a lot, hopefully to Brashard Perriman a lot. But I would hope that the Seahawks have this game fully in control and can just run the ball all day with Chris Carson. And yeah, then Josh Jacobs, Gio Bernard, both. Josh Jacobs is a great running back. Gio Bernard with a great matchup. Duke Johnson is kind of but in PPR leagues, he should be very valuable with that receiving work. And then Mostert coming back. I don't know what to think of that ground game that the 49ers are cooking up, especially with Jeff Wilson also coming back after getting injured after a great game from him the last time he was out there. And then obviously Peyton Barber kind of lagging behind. Just Peyton Barber, can't expect much from that. But yeah, I think that's a great rank. Hopefully that helps you out. And next question coming in from Myron. Once again, he asks, start 3, Todd Gurley, Kareem Hunt, Ezekiel Elliott, or Duke Johnson. That's tough. I think my number 1 out of those guys will be Ezekiel Elliott. All of these guys kind of have been a little disappointing to me so far this season. Kareem Hunt obviously started out strong, has not really been as strong in recent weeks. Todd Gurley, kind of the same, been very hit and miss. And Duke Johnson just being Duke Johnson. But out of these guys, I think I'll pick Ezekiel Elliott, Duke Johnson, and Kareem Hunt. Todd Gurley, I just don't really trust right now. I don't really trust Gurley. He's been, especially with the way the coaches have been treating him, it seems they're very worried about him getting injured, very worried about his knees. And so there are some drives that you won't see Gurley at all. And even though he'll seem healthy, they'll just put in Ito Smith and Brian Hill just to give him some rest. And so that kind of worries me. Whereas the rest, I mean, Duke Johnson and Ezekiel Elliott will be the number 1 backs for their teams. They will be getting the work. And Kareem Hunt, I think, could break out of this slump that he's been on. Browns going up against the Ravens, that could be very tough. But I think if Baker Mayfield does have a tough game passing in this game, then I think Kareem Hunt may be able to make up for it a bit as being kind of a safety blanket for him. But
Yeah.
yeah.
It's a tough question for sure. I think I agree with your analysis there. I mean, Todd Gurley to me is probably you got to probably start him based on his potential. I think they've all been a little disappointing as well. Kareem Hunt's situation is tough because Nick Chubb's obviously there for the taking. Ezekiel Elliott, he's been disappointing, but it's Ezekiel Elliott, so it's always like you do want to start the big guy, and then Duke Johnson. He's starting today, obviously, without David Johnson, as mentioned all throughout today's show. So I'm going with Todd Gurley. I'm going with Kareem Hunt, and I'm going with Ezekiel Elliott probably. I think those three are probably the three to start.
Yeah. Next question coming from Bars in the Tuck. He says, "Morning, lost Gibson. Same here. Sat Akers, lost Gaskin. Same here again.
Yikes.
Need a flex standard. DeAndre right, is DeAndre Washington, who's for the Dolphins, right?
Yep.
I think so. Yeah, DeAndre Washington. I don't know. DeAndre or Dwayne, whoever the Washington who's on the Dolphins is going to probably be taking over is Philip Lindsay, Jeff Wilson Jr., Michael Pittman Jr., Laviska Shenault, and Russell Gage. Just one of those guys? Okay. I guess that makes it a little easier, but also a little harder. I mean, honestly, I don't really trust any. I could trust DeAndre Washington because he does kind of fill a similar role that Gaskin and Savon Ahmed filled in that Dolphins backfield. And so he could possibly, but I'm also a little scared of that. Philip Lindsay just doesn't get used enough. For some reason, the Broncos just keep force feeding Melvin Gordon, even though I'm sure Philip Lindsay could do just as well, if not better, than Gordon. But that's just the Broncos' decision to not use Lindsay at all. Jeff Wilson, I don't really trust that 49ers backfield, like I said about Mostert. Michael Pittman, thought he was going to break out. He's kind of regressed in the past week or so. Laviska Shenault, nice to see him back in, but I still don't trust him. Russell Gage could have some potential with Julio Jones out, but I'm trying to decide right now between Washington, Pittman, and Gage. What are your thoughts, Tones?
That one's tough. There's a couple of factors into that decision as well. Obviously, that Miami backfield's danged up to death, so it looks like it's going to be DeAndre Washington, Laird, and Lynn Bowden Jr. out of their backfield today. So we'll see how that one goes. That's not too appealing. And then Julio Jones is ruled out for Atlanta, so Gage may get a couple more targets over there as well. Kelvin Ridley is playing, but Julio's out, so maybe Gage's stock goes up a little bit. Pittman, as you said, he looked like he was on the up and up, and now all of a sudden it looks like T.Y. Hilton is rebirthed a little bit, and Pittman has definitely cooled off the past couple of weeks after having 3 promising weeks as T.Y. Hilton is taken back over in Indianapolis. Here, it's tough between Washington and Gage. I think it comes down to is Wilson Jr. is hard to trust. Philip Lindsay has had too many bad games this year to trust, in my opinion. And Shenault in a Jacksonville offense, it's just always hard to trust anyone in that offense besides James Robinson. So I'm going to ultimately go with DeAndre Washington based on his touch potential. So I'm going with DeAndre Washington here today.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to agree with you there. I mean, Gaskin, I was really looking forward to it, and then he didn't fill out. And we saw how Savon Ahmed could kind of fill in that role and fill in pretty well for them. And so I'm hoping that DeAndre Washington can do the same. Like I said, he has kind of a similar set of skills as they do. He can run the ball decently well. He's also pretty decent in the passing game. So yeah, I think I'm going to have to lean towards DeAndre Washington as well. It's going to be interesting seeing his full workload as the Dolphins' number 1. Next question coming in from Austin Suachan. He asks, Ebron or Hawkinson? Honestly, I think I'll lean more towards Hawkinson in this one. He's been more consistent throughout the season. Eric Ebron, though, has been a very trying to think of the right word. I was about to say provocative, but I'm not sure if that gets. I feel like that might be too strong. He's been a very appealing choice as of lately, getting actually in the past 2 games, he's had 7 receptions on 11 targets in each of those games. And so that is very appealing for Eric Ebron to get. He also has some touchdown probability, but he also has to deal with some drops that he's had, whereas TJ Hawkinson, I'm more comfortable with just because he's been more consistent in those same past 2 games, whereas Ebron's gotten 7 receptions for 54 and 68 yards. Hawkinson's gotten 7 receptions and 5 receptions for over 80 yards in both those games. So I feel like TJ Hawkinson, especially with Marvin Jones really being the only other reliable pass catcher for the Lions, is more reliable for you, and he's just been more consistent throughout the entire season than Ebron has.
Yeah, I'd go Hawkinson. He's more consistent, gets more targets, and Matt Stafford likes to throw his way without Galladay. Ebron's in a crowded share, and he's dropped a couple key passes over the past couple of weeks, so maybe they won't look his way as much. I'm going with Hawkinson.
Next question. I remember this from last week. Next question coming in from Fismiard asks, PPR flex, Nick Chubb, Deontay Johnson, or Chris Godwin?
That's a tough one. I'm going to go with, I don't know. I like Godwin. I think he breaks out today. Chubb is a good play, but he's against the Ravens. I'm going with Godwin.
Yeah, these are all really... I feel like this is a very good problem to have. Chris Godwin, shown in his past 2 times out, he had a touchdown in one of them and had 8 receptions, 97 yards in the other one. Deontay Johnson has also been very good in the Steelers' past 2 games and for most of the games that he's been able to play this season. And Nick Chubb going up against the Ravens, though. That is a little very, very frightening. Shoot, man. This might come down to a question of just like take whichever guy that you like the most. But if you had to ask me, I might lean more towards Nick Chubb in this situation. Nick Chubb, he's been on fire most of the season. Almost able to just run at will for most guys. He's only had a couple games where he's been under 100 yards rushing. He's only had 3 games under 100 yards rushing compared to 5 games over 100 rushing. He's also had quite a few touchdowns in the games that he has played. So I think I'll lean more towards Nick Chubb, though I can also see why you'd like Chris Godwin more. I can also see why you'd like Deontay Johnson more. Honestly, I wish these were my flex options. There's not one league where I'm like having to really decide between who I want to play in my flex because it's mostly just laid out plain for me. But I think I would lean more towards Chubb in this situation. Bars and Tech says Dolphins have Elijah McGuire playing. Who is Elijah?
He hasn't played since 2018. That's a non-factor, my friend. He'll be their 4th-string running back. He's literally an emergency body. Last time he played was for the Jets, and it didn't go that great.
Yeah, I've never heard of him before. I just know on the depth chart that the Miami Dolphins have on their website it does say DeAndre Washington. Who was Patrick Laird, the guy who looks like he was created in Madden, and Lynn Bowden, the flex guy. So yeah, I don't know who Elijah McGuire is, and he shouldn't really play much of a factor. Half Phantom says, okay, hear me out. So I'm taking out Hopkins because both he and Kyler are banged up, and I'm putting in Rojo because Fournette is out. So he'll get all the touches, presumably. What do you think about that? I think it's an okay move. I mean, obviously, DeAndre Hopkins, I'm not sure if I would do it, but I do really understand it. I mean, Ronald Jones, he has been a very good running back as of recently. Obviously, he's gotten a touchdown in 2 of their past 3
Yep.
games. And DeAndre Hopkins has, as of recently, had multiple just 50-yard games. Obviously, last week against the Rams, though, he did have a touchdown. I'm not sure if I would do it, but I can really understand where you're coming from, especially with him and really most of that Cardinals offense just being kind of said that they're expected to play after dealing with some injuries so far this week. And understand it, especially going up against a Minnesota defense.
Yeah.
Whereas the Giants have a little better of a defense, especially presuming that James Bradbury will be shadowing DeAndre Hopkins most of the game. I can understand that.
Yeah, I like Rojo. I don't have a problem with that. I like your call here. Good luck, buddy.
Yeah. And next question coming in from Controversial asks pick 2 to start Antonio Brown, Marquise Brown, Jarvis Landry, and T.Y. Hilton. Both of Browns have not been very inspiring to me. Antonio Brown, he's not really had a really big game that's really popped off in my eyes. And Marquise Brown, you're really relying on like a deep touchdown pass to him or just a long touchdown pass to him because he doesn't get you the volume. Whereas Jarvis Landry he's been very reliable over the past couple of weeks, really ever since Odell has been ruled out for the season. And T.Y. Hilton has come on strong the past couple of games for the Colts, really, like we said, push Michael Pittman back down. And it's been kind of a reemergence, so I think I'd lean towards Landry and Hilton.
Yeah, I'd probably go with Landry and Ty as well. Ty is playing good, so is Landry.
Yeah, I think Landry was kind of more the obvious out of those guys, and Hilton, although I have been hoping for him more throughout the season. The past 2 games, he's had 81 yards and 110 yards, and both games have had a touchdown. So I think you just got to ride that hot hand going forward. Well, right now it is 11:07 Central Standard Time. We are less than an hour away from kickoff for Week 14 Sunday games. Most of you have semifinal matchups that you're looking for, quarterfinal fantasy football matchups that you're looking forward to, unless you're in a Week 17 championship league. In that case, I hope you can win this last game and make it into the playoffs. But that's really going to do it from me and Tones. Tones, do you have any last words?
Good luck today. Hopefully our advice helps you get some victory and maybe some more money in your pockets. Good luck in the playoffs. Join us next week as we hopefully can continue helping your playoff progress. And it's going to be a fun day of football, a lot of 3 o'clock games. So it'll be interesting to see how fantasy shakes out.
Yep. Well, for me and Tones, that's going to do it.